On June 26, 1877, in one of the most remarkable speeches of his career, Wilfred Laurier attempted to curb the growing clerical interference in the political life of the province of Quebec.
Our souls are immortal, but our means are limited. We constantly strive toward an ideal which we never attain. We dream of good, but we never realize the best. We only reach the goal we have set for ourselves to discover new horizons opening up, which we had not before even suspected. We rush on toward them, and those horizons, explored in their turn, reveal to us others which lead us on ever further and further. And thus it will be as long as man is what he is. As long as the immortal soul inhabits a mortal body, his desires will always be vaster than his means, and his actions will never rise to the height of his conceptions. He is the real Sisyphus of the fable. His work always finished must always be begun again. This condition of our nature is precisely that which makes the greatness of man, for it condemns him irrevocably to movement, to progress. Our means are limited, but our nature is perfectible, and we have the infinite for our arena. Thus there is always room for the perfecting of our nature and for the attainment by a larger number of an easier way of life. In our adversaries' party, it is the custom to accuse us of irreligion. They reproach us with seeking to silence the administrative body of the church and to prevent it from teaching the people their duties as citizens and electors. They reproach us with wanting to hinder the clergy from sharing in politics and to relegate them to the sacristy. In the name of what principle should the friends of liberty seek to deny to the priest the right to take part in political affairs? In the name of what principle should the friends of liberty seek to deny to the priest the right to have and to express political opinions, the right to approve or disapprove public men and their acts, and to instruct the people in what he believes to be their duty? In the name of what principle should he not have the right to say that if I am elected, religion will be endangered, when I have the right to say that if my adversary is elected, the state will be endangered? No, let the priest speak and preach as he thinks best. Such is his right. And no Canadian liberal will dispute that right. Everyone has the right not only to express his opinion, but to influence, if he can, by the expression of his opinion, the opinion of his fellow citizens. This right exists for all, and there can be no reason why the priests should be deprived of it. I am here to speak my whole mind, and I may add that I am far from finding opportune the intervention of the clergy in the domain of politics, as it has been exercised for some years. I believe, on the contrary, that from the standpoint of the respect due his character, the priest has everything to lose by meddling in the ordinary questions of politics. Still, his right to do so is indisputable, and if he thinks proper to use it, our duty as liberals is to guarantee it to him against all denial. This right, however, is not unlimited. We have no absolute right among us. The rights of each man in our state of society end precisely where they encroach upon the rights of others. The right of interference in politics ends where it would encroach upon the elector's independence. The constitution of the country rests on the freely expressed will of every elector. It is perfectly legitimate to alter the elector's opinion by argument and all other means of persuasion, but never by intimidation. As a matter of fact, persuasion changes the elector's conviction. Intimidation does not. If the opinion expressed by the majority of the electors is not their real opinion, but an opinion snatched from them by fraud, by threats, or by corruption, the Constitution is violated. You have not government by the majority, but government by the minority.
When the Métis leader, Louis Riel, was hanged in Regina on that cold November day in 1885, the Canadian Confederation, which was but 18 years old, was torn asunder. Laurier, on March 16, 1886, made himself the spokesman of the fear and the bitterness which had been allowed to grow.
I appeal now to any friend of liberty in this House, and I ask, when subjects of His Majesty have been petitioning for years for their rights, and these rights have not only been ignored, but have been denied, and when these men take their lives in their hands and rebel, will anyone in this House say that these men, when they got their rights, should not have saved their heads as well, and that the criminals, if criminals there were in this rebellion, are not those who fought and bled and died, but the men who sit on these treasury benches? Sir, rebellion is always an evil. It is always an offense against the positive law of a nation. It is not always a moral crime. The Minister of Militia, in the week that preceded the execution of Riel, declared, "I hate all rebels. I have no sympathy, good or bad or indifferent, with rebellion." Sir, what is hateful is not rebellion, but the despotism which induces that rebellion. What is hateful are not rebels, but the men who, having the enjoyment of power, do not discharge the duties of power. They are the men who, having the power to redress wrongs, refuse to listen to the petitions that are sent to them. They are the men who, when they are asked for a loaf, give a stone. Though, Mr. Speaker, these men were in the wrong, though the rebellion had to be put down, though it was the duty of the Canadian government to assert its authority and vindicate the law, still I ask any friend of liberty, is there not the feeling rising in his heart stronger than all reasoning to the contrary, that those men were excusable. I am a British subject, and I value the proud title as much as anyone in this house. But if it is expected of me that I shall allow fellow countrymen, unfriended, undefended, unprotected, and unrepresented in this house, to be trampled underfoot by this government, I say that this is not what I understand by loyalty. I would call that slavery. Sir, I am not one of those who looked upon Riel as a hero. Nature had endowed him with many brilliant qualities, but nature denied him that supreme quality without which all other qualities, however brilliant, are of no avail. But he was not a bad man. I do not believe, at least, that he was the bad man he has been represented to be in a certain press. But that he was insane appears to me to be beyond the possibility of controversy. Today, not to speak of those who have lost their lives, our prisons are full of men who, despairing ever to get justice by peace, sought to obtain it by war, who, despairing of ever being treated like free men, took their lives in their hands rather than be treated as slaves. They have suffered a great deal. They are suffering still. Yet their sacrifices will not be without reward. Their leader is in the grave. They are in durance. But from their prisons they can see that justice, that liberty which they sought in vain and for which they fought not in vain, has at last dawned upon their country. This side of the house long sought, but sought in vain, to obtain that measure of justice. It could not come then, but it came after the war. It came as the last conquest of that insurrection. And again I say that their country has conquered with their martyrdom. And if we look at that one fact alone, there was cause sufficient, independent of all others, to extend mercy to the one who is dead and to those who live.
On November 17, 1880, a dinner was offered in Montreal to the French-Canadian poet Louis Fréchette to mark the literary distinction conferred upon him by l'Académie Française. Laurier saw the honor as a recognition of le fait français in America. As the chairman has announced, I have now the honor to propose the health of the French Academy. Gentlemen, adversity is the crucible which tests all sentiments, and it was in the evil days of our old mother country, during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, that we felt how deeply we were attached to her and how warmly we loved her. Gentlemen, I take you to witness.
if the wound left by that cruel war in the hearts of the children of old France is in any respect more painful than the wound left in the hearts of the children of New France. It was when the first news of the disasters of the French army reached us that we felt how French we were. Who does not remember the spectacle? In those mournful days of the whole French population of Quebec massed around the newspaper offices and waiting with painful anxiety for the telegraph to give them the result of the battles of the previous day on the soil of their ancient mother country. Who does not remember the enormous crowds quivering with anguish and yet ready to thrill with emotion at the slightest ray of hope, and only dispersing when the fatal truth was no longer in doubt? And when the final catastrophe occurred, when we had to yield to the inevitable, and when we had to resign ourselves to the conviction that Alsace and Lorraine were to be torn from France, I appeal to your recollections, gentlemen. If we were to be deprived of one of our members, what is it not the truth that we could not have suffered more cruelly? Since that time, we have waited with as deep a conviction and as firm a hope as those whom we persist in calling our brethren over the sea for the day of revenge. The age is no longer one in which populations may be violently torn from their native country and annexed against their will to a government which is not a government of their choice. The time has passed when might can permanently overbear right. Descendants of the French race as we are, and long accustomed as we have been to the amplest liberty as English subjects, though loudly and proudly under the shadow of the British flag proclaiming our French origin, we also have faith in this inevitable justice of human things to which an illustrious statesman referred not long ago. More than one of us, at the sight of France, so calm and so patient, has been led to hope, nay, to believe that the day will come when that old device of our country, which goes back to the early days of the colony and is still to be seen inscribed on one of our public buildings, will be realized in Europe. Je suis un chien qui ronge l'os. En le rongeant, je prends mon repos. Un jour viendra qui n'est pas venu, quand je mordrai qui m'aura mordu. As for us, gentlemen, we have our revenge already. After the final cession of this country to the Crown of England, our forefathers loyally accepted the new order of things and made a vow to themselves that if the occasion ever arose, they would spill their blood as freely for their new sovereign as they had done for their old. But they promised themselves also that never should the French language, to the accents of which they had been rocked on their mother's knee, disappear from this continent of America. At present, after the lapse of a century, the French Academy honors us with the freedom of the city in the Republic of French letters, and proclaims in the face of the world that not only does the French language still live among us, but that it is worthy of the Academy. There,
gentlemen, is our revenge. We ask no other. On June the 6th, 1891, Johnny Macdonald died in Ottawa. It was, in many ways, quite fitting that the two major eulogies delivered in the House of Commons be given by French-speaking Canadians, the conservative Sir Hector Langevin and the liberal Wilfred Laurier. Langevin, overcome with emotion, was unable to finish his speech. This task fell to Laurier. Mr. Speaker, I fully appreciate the intensity of the grief which fills the souls of all those who were the friends and followers of Sir John Macdonald. At the loss of the great leader whose whole life has been so closely identified with their party, a party upon which he has thrown such brilliance and luster. But we, on this side of the House, who were his opponents, who did not believe in his policy nor in his methods of government, we too take our full share of their grief. For the loss which they deplore today is far and away beyond and above the ordinary compass of party range. It is in every respect a great national loss, for he who is no more was in many respects Canada's most illustrious son, and in every sense Canada's foremost citizen and statesman. At the period of life to which Sir John Macdonald had arrived, death, whenever it comes, cannot be said to come unexpected. Some few months ago, during the turmoil of the late election, when the country was made aware that on a certain day the physical strength of the veteran Premier had not been equal to his courage, and that his intense labor for the time being had prostrated his singularly wiry frame, everybody, with the exception perhaps of his buoyant self, was painfully anxious lest perhaps the angel of death had touched him with his wing. When a few days ago, in the heat of an angry discussion, the news spread in this house that of a sudden his condition had become alarming, the surging waves of angry discussion were at once hushed, and everyone, friend and foe, realized that this time, for a certainty, the angel of death had appeared and had crossed the threshold of his home. Thus, we were not taken by surprise. And although we were prepared for the sad event, yet it is almost impossible to convince the unwilling mind that it is true, that Sir John Macdonald is no more, that the chair which we now see vacant shall remain forever vacant, that the face so familiar in this Parliament for the last 40 years shall be seen no more, and that the voice so well known shall be heard no more, whether in solemn debate or in pleasant and mirthful tone. In fact, the place of Sir John Macdonald in this country was so large and so absorbing that it is almost impossible to conceive that the political life of this country, the fate of this country, can continue without him. His loss overwhelms us. Sir John Macdonald now belongs to the ages, and it can be said with certainty that the career which has just been closed is one of the most remarkable careers of this century. It would be premature at this time to attempt to fix or anticipate what will be the final judgment of history upon him. But there were in his career and in his life features so prominent and so conspicuous that already they shine with a glow that time cannot alter, which even now appear before the eye, such as they will appear to the end in history. The fact that he could congregate together elements of the most heterogeneous and blend them into one compact party, and to the end of his life keep them steadily under his hand, is perhaps altogether unprecedented. The fact that during all those years he retained unimpaired not only the confidence, but the devotion, the ardent devotion and affection of his party, is evidence that beside those higher qualities of statesmanship to which we were the daily witnesses, he was also endowed with those inner, subtle, undefinable graces of soul which win and keep the hearts of men. As to his statesmanship, Mr. Speaker, it is written in the history of Canada. It may be said without any exaggeration whatever that the life of Sir John Macdonald, from the date he entered Parliament, is the history of Canada. For he was connected and associated with all the events, all the facts, which brought Canada from the position Canada then occupied, the position of two small provinces, having nothing in common but a common allegiance, united by a bond of paper, and united by nothing else, to the present state of development which Canada has reached. I am only too glad here to remember only the great services he has performed for our country, to remember that his actions always displayed great originality of views, unbounded fertility of resources, a high level of intellectual conceptions, and, above all, a far-reaching vision beyond the event of the day, and still higher, permeating the whole, a broad patriotism, a devotion to Canada's welfare, Canada's advancement, and Canada's glory. Three times, in 1882, 1886, 1887, the Canadian House of Commons set aside its routine business in order to discuss the plight of Ireland and of the Irish people. It was Wilfred Laurier in 1887 who begged Great Britain to end the coercion of Ireland. As this House has already twice expressed its sympathy with Ireland in the cause of Home Rule, there would not be, under ordinary circumstances, any occasion for an additional expression of views and wishes already well known.
But, Mr. Speaker, the circumstances today are not ordinary. They are even more painful and deplorable than the ordinary circumstances in that unhappy land. A new calamity menaces it, a calamity of so great a character that it calls for an additional expression of the sympathy not only of those who love Ireland, but of those as well who love England and fair play and are proud of her name. It must be admitted that it is a most evil day, indeed not only for Ireland, but for England as well, when in this Jubilee year, in any part of the British Empire, a civilized people is to be subjected to laws so cruel as those contemplated to be imposed upon the people of Ireland. And speaking as a French Canadian, I cannot help comparing the history of my own country with the history of Ireland today. I see much similitude between the situation of Ireland today and the situation of Canada, and especially Lower Canada, 50 years ago. It seems to me that the public men who today have to deal with the cause of Ireland are hampered by a distrust of the Irish people in the same way as the public men who had to deal with the cause of Canada 50 years ago were hampered by a distrust of the people of Canada. There are only two ways of governing men: by despotism or coercion, if you choose to call it by that name, or by freedom. You can coerce an inferior or uncivilized race, but never a proud and self-respecting people. Coercion has been tried not once or twice, but times almost without number in Ireland. And it has failed every time. And if tried again, it must fail as it did before. The Irish people would not be the proud people that they are if they were to be cowed by coercion into abandoning one single iota of what they deemed to be their just rights. Sir, there is no rebellion today in Ireland, it is true. But is there contentment? Is there cheerfulness of heart in the allegiance which they owe to the crown of England? Sir, the condition of the Irish people today is about the most miserable of any people in Europe. Must this last forever? Is there no remedy to such a state of things? It has lasted already for 7 long years. And shall we be told today that there is no remedy for the evil? I say, in view of our own experience, there is a remedy, and that remedy is not coercion, but freedom. Let the English government treat the Irish people as they have treated the Canadian people. Let them trust the Irish people as they have trusted the Canadian people. Let them appeal to their hearts, to their gratitude, to their nobler sentiments. Let them loosen the grip in which they now hold that unfortunate land. Let them give them some measure of local liberty. Let them restore the Parliament to College Green. And I venture to say that this long accumulated bitterness caused by ages of oppression will melt away in a very few years. And I venture to say that after that, the bond of union between England and Ireland will be stronger than it ever was before. It will not be a bond of union based upon physical force, but it will be a bond of union based upon mutual affection and respect.
The following excerpts from some of his speeches best illustrate, we think, the overall Canadianism that motivated Wilfred Laurier.
We are French Canadians, but our country is not confined to the territory overshadowed by the citadel of Quebec. Our country is Canada. Our fellow countrymen are not only those in whose veins runs the blood of France. They are all those, whatever their race or whatever their language, whom the fortunes of war, the chances of fate, or their own choice have brought among us. The rights of my fellow countrymen of different origins are as dear to me, as sacred to me, as the rights of my own race. If there is anything to which I have devoted my political life, it is to try to promote unity, harmony, and amity between the diverse elements of this country. My friends can desert me. They can remove their confidence from me. They can withdraw the trust they have placed in my hands. But never shall I deviate from that line of policy, whatever may be the consequences, whether loss of prestige, loss of popularity, or loss of power. If upon my deathbed I could say that thanks to my efforts, one solitary error had been eradicated, that by sheer exertion, race hatred had been caused to disappear from Canada's soil, I should indeed die happily, with the conviction and assurance that my life had not been lived in vain. I am a Canadian. Canada
has been the inspiration of my life. I have had before me a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day, a policy of true Canadianism. In all the difficulties, in all the pains and all the vicissitudes of our situation, let us remember that love is better than hatred, and faith better than doubt. And let hope in our future destinies be the pillar of fire to guide us in our career. The more I advance in life, and I am not a young man, the more I thank Providence that my birth took place in this fair land of Canada. Canada has been modest in its history, although its history has been heroic in many ways. But its history, in my estimation, is only commencing. It is commencing in this century. The 19th century was the century of the United States. I think we can claim that it is Canada that shall fill the 20th century. I cannot hope that I shall see much of the development which the future has in store for my country. But whenever my eyes shall close to the light, it is my wish, nay, it is my hope, that they close upon a Canada united in all its elements, united in every particular, every element cherishing the tradition of the past, and all uniting in cherishing still more hope for the future.